Good day. Welcome back to the Truck Focus Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hanbury. So one thing I really appreciate about the transportation industry is connecting with different professionals that know a heck of a lot more than I do in topics that I know have a really big impact on carriers. So in today's episode, I'm excited to introduce to you Natasha Braun, owner of ProRate PLUS Trucking Admin. You see, one area of compliance that I know to be extremely important, but personally find quite difficult to manage is IFTA and ProRate. IFTA stands for the International Fuel Tax Agreement, which basically was created to streamline the collection and distribution of fuel taxes for carriers that operate in multiple jurisdictions, also known as a federal carrier. So understanding and complying with IFTA rules is extremely important, which is why I really value Natasha and her company so much. So in addition to IFTA and IFTA, ProRate is another area where carriers need to be extremely mindful, especially right now, just because things take a little bit longer to get done. So today's episode will be excellent listening for those that are maybe operating in a sense where, hey, maybe I need IFTA, maybe I need ProRate, but they also want to be introduced to an industry leader that truly gets what's going on and is passionate for her client's success, so that way they can save time, save money, and make sure that they're operating within the boundaries of compliance. Well, let's get to it. Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Truck Focus Podcast. Josh Hanbury here, your host. I'm really excited about today's episode as I get to interview someone that got me excited in a couple of ways. One, she's solving problems for carriers that I find to be quite difficult, but also I like learning about her entrepreneurial story, being a mom, being a loving wife, and still going for it. All these things get me super excited. So welcome, Natasha.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
This is awesome. So yeah, why don't you kind of start us off by highlighting who is Natasha?
So yes, mom, mom and wife and entrepreneur. I started my side business, and in 2020, when things were so crazy, I decided to grow that into something bigger. And I needed the flexibility for my kids. During COVID, they're home half the time, most of the time. I had to sneak away for meetings in various hiding places. So it was quite the year, 2020, but my business has been going since 2015. And yeah, I really like helping people understand this part of their business. And I love being there for my family too.
It's powerful. Yeah. And I think that as professionals in our industry, that's some of the best things that we can care about is the people in the industry while being able to still care and manage our homes. And yeah, I think that's super powerful. Okay. So why don't we start off then? You can name drop your business and kind of give us a summary of what your business does. And then we'll kind of jump back into a little bit more of your backstory of how you got there.
Okay, so it's ProRate PLUS Trucking Admin. In the name, I do a lot of ProRate and IFTA. I've helped with many other parts of fleet administration. I've worked a little bit with safety groups, doing comply works, updating, that kind of thing. I've worked with US DOT applications and operating authority. I would say the most of what I do though is ProRate and IFTA.
That's awesome. And to me, that's one of the hardest parts of compliance is those two factors. So it's nice that, you're good at it, you're passionate about it. So yeah, it's a big welcome for sure. So I guess to backtrack a little bit, at what point did you get involved in the transportation industry? You mentioned you started the side business 2015. Were you working, like, you don't have to name drop the carrier or nothing like that, but were you working for a carrier before and that's kind of how you got your feet wet, or what was your process?
Yes, exactly. So I worked, I've been working for trucking companies since 2011, but it's only been two. So it would be 2013, I started working with fleet administration. Before that, I was hiring drivers mostly and other employees. then I got into fleet administration in 2013. So I was full-time with that company. And what happened is they sold a branch of their company to one of the managers. And that kind of split away. And I could see where the manager could use some help.
Yes.
So I spoke with my managers in the company, and they authorized it. So that's where I started. I branched out into my side business, and he was my only client until I left my full-time position. So otherwise I wouldn't have been able to manage a full-time position, mom duties, and many clients. So yeah.
Wow. You don't hear that kind of transition very often, where you get a green light on growth and they see, okay, like they had to see the vision too. So good for you. So have you been entrepreneurial in the past, or kind of what sparked, you know what, I see this need and I can help fulfill that need? Like, how did that process go?
I've definitely been entrepreneurial in the past. I had two businesses in my younger years. I started one cleaning when I didn't have any experience anywhere. And after that, I was a dance teacher.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I had started a company with prop manipulation. It's basically hula hoop dance.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was doing really well, but I definitely needed something more stable to support the family. So yeah.
That's exciting. Yeah. And I think that's a really good growth story for a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs too. Obviously, in transportation, with the amount of small businesses that exist, a lot of our stories are exactly that. You work somewhere, you get some really good skills, you see a different opportunity and you jump. And yeah, my years ago when I had a business coach, he would talk about a terror barrier, and you obviously destroyed yours because here you are today. But yeah, a lot of people will be kind of at the edge and they're, do I go for it? And that could be, do I become an owner operator instead of a company driver? And do I, if it's a ProRate IFTA business, if it's a compliance business, even my podcast, it was much, I don't know, what if I fall kind of feeling. And yeah, it's nice to see that you're like, I'm going for it. That's good.
Yeah.
So good for you. And yeah, I think, props to your family too. I always say it's a family mission here, where like my wife is very supportive and my 11-year-old's very involved, just because for me, that's my strength. And yeah, it's nice to know that you can proudly say, yeah, I'm rocking it with a family and we make it work. So good for you. That's super exciting.
Thank you.
So can you walk us through, we're going to shift a little bit more into what is IFTA and ProRate, and then start asking some questions that I have myself. I know that carriers would definitely have too, but can you kind of highlight what is IFTA and what is ProRate? Like, what are those services?
Yes. So IFTA is basically where your fuel tax is being handed out to the other jurisdictions. So it used to be that you used to have fuel permits for each different jurisdiction. So for example, in BC, if you don't have IFTA and ProRate, you have to get a licensing permit and you have to get a fuel tax permit. So IFTA, the IFTA agreement allows for one collection of that data, one system where the data is collected, and then they collect or return funds through the base jurisdiction. So then the base jurisdiction deals with the other jurisdictions. So that's for IFTA. For ProRate, it's kind of similar. So instead of having to get licensing permits, you're prorated and you get decals for your plate. You get a cab card with your registration copy, and your fees go to base jurisdiction, and then the base jurisdiction allocates fees to the other jurisdictions.
Wow. And in order to set that up, I'm assuming there's a pretty strenuous application process that a carrier would have to go through in order to even receive the benefits of this, to be able to use either of those programs?
So IFTA is not as complicated. It's mostly a one-page application. Then with ProRate, it does get more complicated and requires patience. And carriers really have to pay attention right now to what they're submitting, the documents, that kind of thing, because the wait time has been so long in the last few months. And if something's wrong with an application, it comes back and then it could take even longer to get registered.
Yeah, we were talking off camera too prior in regards to maybe part of that has to do with the pandemic and just how, I'll be blunt, so you're not as blunt, but extremely frustrating on behalf of a carrier, because if they're waiting to do work and they're, really at the end of the day, the clock's always ticking. And when something is out of all of our control because the process or the documentation has been submitted and it just takes an extremely long time, very frustrating and very disheartening at times, because it could be, okay, well, I guess I lost that job, or you just can't streamline the business like you anticipated. And you have my empathy working with carriers that sometimes they may not understand it's not you either. It's it's just the process right now. And that's tough for sure.
Yeah, it's often a carrier company that hires owner operators. And then, there's this smaller owner operator company that is just so eager to get to work. And every day that they miss is like, bills or their family that they're supporting. And, it's tough, definitely. I've got carriers that are calling every day. Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? And I feel for them, because it's always my priority to get these trucks prorated as soon as possible and get trucks to work.
And I think that's a great priority, because at the end of the day, it's a small community, even though trucking is a large community. But yeah, people that actually care about the well-being of their clients, I honestly, just from experience, believe that's a small amount of professionals where it's not just about the dollar, it's about the success of your client. And I think that's a good attribute. So carriers that are listening, be patient. Again, it's not once the process is in works, unfortunately right now it is taking a little bit longer. But yeah, I appreciate the honesty with that, and it's just nice to see. So when you're working with, you mentioned owner operators. So when you're working with carriers, you're working with carriers that are hiring on owner operators. You work with owner operators specifically, and basically any size of carrier, or do you have kind of a preferred size that you like working with?
No, I will work with any size carrier. Typically the bigger ones, they have a pretty good handle on a system for ProRate, like tracking for IFTA, tracking the kilometers and fuel. Usually they have systems in place for that. The smaller ones, sometimes I have to coach them through what kind of information they need to start tracking, because as provincial carriers, they don't need as much. So
right. That was the next question I had too, is are you working with both provincial and federal carriers then?
Yes, I have in the past. Mostly it's federal though, because in order to be prorated, they've got to be federal.
Right. Yeah. So either cross provincial borders or I guess nation or national borders. So yeah, no, that's exciting. Okay. And then, so with your company, you're able to serve like Western Canadian, like license plate carriers, Alberta only, or across the country, or what regions do you cover?
So across the country, some of it I have to learn, but my majority experience is Alberta and BC.
Nice.
And that's where I'm most comfortable. But if someone in another jurisdiction needs help, I am totally willing to dive in and learn exactly what they need to travel those jurisdictions or come out of them.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good market share too. BC, Alberta, and Ontario definitely have the majority of what we would identify as like over the road trucks. So that's exciting. And then, yeah, good for you again for just having the attitude willing to learn, because I think anyone that goes even from BC to Alberta, you're like, why is that different? Like your cousins, like it should be the exact same. Like it's a Christmas dinner, but yeah, no, I want it this way and I like it that way. And so, yeah, it's a good challenge for sure. So when a carrier is getting set up for IFTA and ProRate, mentioned IFTA is basically a one-page document, but is there anything that they would need to bring to you at time of application?
So for ProRate, for ProRate, yeah. So they have the established place of business questionnaire where basically the carrier is providing proof that they're paying taxes to their base jurisdiction, that their company, that is their base jurisdiction. So they have to provide that proof, which, and the first form, they have kind of a wording error. So there's a list of documents that have to be supplied. And in the wording, it looks like they only have to provide one of those, but they actually have to provide all of them. Oh. So I did mention that to ProRate office, but they said it takes a long time to get things changed. So hopefully that gets changed. It just simplifies it a bit. So be prepared to do some digging into your company tax information, that kind of thing.
It's good to know, especially with the, like you mentioned initially, the long process to get approved, just for them to say, hey, you forgot these other yeah, okay, that's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, that's where I come in. So if I send them that form, I usually highlight or just let them know, okay, you have to provide all of these, not just one, even though it looks like it's just one. Yeah, so it's, and then as far as the truck specific documents, it's, you know, there's often on ownership documents missing signatures, bill of sale, lease. The owner, for some reason, retains a copy that hasn't been signed by the seller or hasn't been signed, like they haven't signed it themselves, which is an easier fix, obviously. But lease companies not signing their own documents has been strange and consistent.
Yes.
So
yes,
that's one thing. The seller and the buyer have to, well, the buyer has to match on, like say we have a lease. With the lease, there has to be an authorization from the lease company to plate the vehicle in the carrier's name. So that has to match. The buyer has to match on the lease document, on the authorization document, and there's also an authorization for vehicle services that the Alberta Registry Office needs. So that has to match. As far as the buyer, those three documents, the buyer has to match on all. So that's one thing that I'm struggling with as well. Often they'll have the company name on one of the documents and then the owner's personal name on another of the documents. So it has to go back to the lease company to get fixed.
Yeah, I've seen that quite a bit too. And I don't know if that's because they're in a rush, but yeah, I always question, how can this get passed? Like the point that it's at right now where funds are released or transfer of title is done or anything without, yeah, where's your signature? Or another one that I'll see is the date. And like if a bill of sale date is after a lease date and you're like, how could you lease something that you haven't quite owned yet? Like, yeah, there's different things like that. And I think part of it is just like, yeah, we're just mad rushing to try and get stuff done. And if no one catches it until you catch it, because it has to be perfect on the submission. Yeah, that's a interesting challenge. Because years ago, I used to own a small trucking company in BC, and Yeah, I remember when we were trying to, first it was buy out one of the trucks, like the lease was done, we had to give the check, and tracking down all of these signatures, that same thing. We're like, what are you talking about? Like, it's been in our company name for like from the prior owner. And they're like, well, someone did it wrong. So yeah, it was just a wild goose chase, and trying to manage that while trying to manage clients and business and drivers and stuff, it's tough. So it's nice again that you're there to say, no, this has to be perfect. And yes, I can help you walk you through it. But yeah, having a watchful eye is important for sure. So would you say then one of the biggest challenges carriers face is when it comes to the setup process is perfection of documentation, like making sure it's accurate?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then how about the managing of it from if it's the day-to-day? I know there's carrier responsibility, and then smaller fleets, there's also some responsibility on the driver just to make sure things are handed in properly. But starting with the carrier, in your experience, is that one of the toughest things that they face, is more so just making sure they're actually gathering receipts? And what type of things, I guess, would they be required to hand in, or can you walk us through that?
Right. So fuel tax is one of the things where the information is often tracked through a tracking device in the truck for kilometers. A lot of fueling stations and companies have programs where you can go into their website and pull your own reports. That definitely makes it easier. But that being said, fuel cards are sometimes assigned to drivers and not to units. So these drivers, it's their responsibility to enter their unit number into the pump, or they have to keep a fuel log. And sometimes I've had to go through log books. And one of the bigger things is trying to decipher their writing, or which province the fuel was fueled in. So it does require, IFTA requires some work on the drivers. And if they don't, like I would say, if they had any questions, to just ask their supervisor managers, because they should know the importance behind tracking the fuel and the distance. If they know the why, they're more likely to be more diligent with it.
Yeah, and penmanship for drivers. Speaking, I'm a former driver myself, and I would get challenged every day. I handed in a logbook. What does that say? What does that say? And when you're not thinking about the bigger picture, you're just, again, we can talk about ELDs and like the federal mandate that just came in. So a lot of so this is the part, a little side tangent. In Alberta, when you're a provincial carrier, anytime you fuel, you're required to enter your fuel amount. As a federal carrier, it's just an on-duty task. So I wish there was consistency across the board in regards to hours of service requirements, because in your case right now, when you're looking at IFTA requirements, it's going to be tough because drivers are learning how to use a telematic system. What is this thing in my truck? Is it following me? That whole change management. No longer pen to paper. Now it's an electronic tablet or a phone, which again, some of the older generation, it's tough, which I have all the empathy in the world for. And now with the IFTA requirements, it's like, okay, so how are we going to manage that part? So yeah, empathy to carriers and drivers, what they have to do. But exactly. You have to do it though. And again, going back to penmanship, I could only imagine you're like, what does that even say? Is that a 9? Or how are you in Ontario? I thought you were in Alberta. Like, all of that. It's, I could see that being a challenge for sure. So what advice then would you share to carriers and drivers that aren't necessarily paying as close of attention to those fine details as they should?
Again, if the drivers know why, and the carriers usually have an idea of why, they have to track their fuel tax accurately for accurate returns, and in case of an audit, that kind of thing. So, and for drivers, like I said, ask questions. If you see a way to make something more simplified, go for it, because go for it, speak to management. really, I always say, like, I look at how drivers got into the industry. They want to drive, right? They don't want to sit at a desk and they don't want to do the paperwork, which I understand. So as an industry, if we can simplify any of that for the drivers, all the better. Because yeah, some of these older generation drivers, that's why they got into this. They want to drive. And we have piled in the last, how many years, we have piled a lot of paperwork. And now we're getting into a lot of online or electronic tracking, that kind of thing. But it's a lot for them, I think. So hopefully it gets more simple, but we're still as safe, as we can be.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think, so this is tough. They went through a period of minimal paperwork. You'd scoff at the fact that there was paperwork, to overload of paperwork for rightful reasons. And that's what's tough is, so I can wear a legislative hat and focus on hours of service. You could wear a legislative hat, focus on IFTA and ProRate. Someone else is going to think about environmental spills, dangerous goods, all of these different components that are involved in transportation. And it's like they don't sit in the same room making decisions at the same time, because that's just not how bills get passed and blah, 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 blah. But you're right, though, it's overload for drivers. But now with the increase, which I'm a massive fan of technology, and let's be innovative and let's simplify, there's something called app overload, where it's one app for this, and oh no, the app only does this. Okay, there's one app for this, but no, still it only does this. And you just kind of go in this big circle where there's a lot of really good solutions out there, but learning, I guess the next step would be to learn how can they all speak to each other. So that way, again, professional drivers can focus on doing that. Let's be a professional driver. We're our best customer service. We're the best public eye, and we're not, app overload and crap, my battery's dead. What do I do? So yeah, I think that's the next step in just improving. And hopefully that helps what you're able to do too, because yeah, it's a lot. And yeah, proud of you though, for just being able to see that it is a lot. And I think years of experience helps too, because I've met some interesting cats out there that they claim this is the space that I'm in, this is a service that I do, and they have the blinders on, or the blinders on. This is the only challenge that a driver faces, but it's nice that you're able to see full scope. Like, okay, I get it. You have a lot on your plate, and let's encourage, like, how can we improve this process? So good for you. Like, that's super smart.
I think it helped that I started in the industry hiring drivers. Yes. Yes. So I could see all of the training and a lot of redundancy in the onboarding process. And, I definitely felt for them then.
Yeah, you're right, though. I was on I wasn't speaking, I was listening to a onboarding and recruitment. It was like a webinar put on earlier this week. And it was interesting hearing, I forget the guy's name. I would name drop him if I remember, because he was on it. He has a mindset like you, like there's a lot of redundancy and how can we improve these processes? But he said a lot of things where I'm like, yeah, I never really thought of it that way, even though if I've been through it or if I've hired myself, I'm kind of like, that's a really good point. And yeah, I think understanding and having a little bit of empathy for what drivers go through while also empowering the fact that they're professionals I think that's important. And yeah, again, having experience, you're right, though, I think that helps for sure. That's awesome. So, sorry, I know you mentioned a couple other things that your business does. You have IFTA ProRate services. What were the other services that you provide?
So I have helped with getting permits, weight permits, and just applying for the US DOT. There's several entities involved with traveling in the US. So I wouldn't say I specialize in that, but I can definitely assist with getting people started, getting companies started. I have tracked inspections for companies before. There's a lot of really good programs they can use for that now. So I wouldn't say it's something that I would be that interested in doing. But I have, and and it might be depending if it's a carrier that is already with me. If so, for example, I have one client, couple of my clients, they've said, hey, we have this one task and we're overloaded, our staff is overloaded, can you pick it up for us? And so I've done that for companies, just even pulling a report and sending it out every week, something like that. And if I can help and I have the capacity, I will definitely do that kind of thing too.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's exciting. And yeah, because you was 2020, obviously in the face of the pandemic is when you were going full tilt and navigating family. As things, well, I don't know if it's calm down is the right term, but as things kind of go to normal, it's nice that you can identify, yes, I have capacity for this, or no, this isn't a task that I want to take on, but you're still able to help your clients with that. I think that's super exciting too. And especially being like, it's a long tenured business, like 2015 is a really good amount of time. But now that you're able to focus, again, it's nice that we all have priorities, but you're able to focus on this full time. It's nice to hear what you just mentioned, where do I have capacity for this? Yes. Okay, good. And then you're helping clients really succeed, because it's the, not being negative, but it's the death by 1,000 cuts, I find. And that one thing that no one had capacity to do that fell off is the one thing that's going to hurt you through an audit, or it's going to hurt you because, oh, it's insurance renewal and I didn't pay that ticket, crap. Where it's those type of things where it's nice that you see, again, because you have full exposure, okay, yeah, I can help with that because I have the capacity for it. I think that's a huge value add for sure.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's neat. So, so one of the toughest questions, as I've been told, I like to ask, it's all about legacy. And I'm a big believer in we're building our legacy every day. And we can be a good person every day. You could be a not so good person every day. And really one interaction is your legacy with that other person. So that's my frame of mind, because I think it's important, and especially in transportation where unfortunately there's a lot of negativity at times. One bad accident, which I'm not justifying accidents, but that will go on the news for a month. And it could just be, yeah, there's lots of reasons for things that happen, but there's not as much positivity. So I try and focus more on that side. So my question to you, and again, be as open or as closed as you want with your answer, but as you continue to navigate in this space, what do you want your legacy to be with not just your clients, but you as a person? Like, what do you want to be known for?
So I haven't really thought of what I would want my legacy to be, but something to be known for. I really want to help people get their trucks going as fast as possible. So that's one thing. I would like to leave something that, or create something as a company that supports in both like BC and Alberta. So that's something that I like to do. I have one person working with me that is an Alberta resident. I have roots in both provinces. So I also want people to be supported in their own environment. So I don't think I'll ever have, well, maybe an office where people have to come and, you know, there's a lot of time wasted traveling to work in office. So I'd like to create something where people can have that option of working from home. If it helps them, like maybe even help other moms that would like to learn something or create an income from home. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with things, I guess.
Nice. That's powerful. And I like what you just mentioned there too, because I can identify this as a dad and you can identify as a mom. And yeah, my wife works from home and she's a superhero. Like, she's incredible, because I'm like, sorry, you went through what today? And just like, yeah, yeah, I don't want to say her and blush and brag about my wife, but I think it's impactful. It's super powerful or empowering, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So the fact that you just mentioned that, I kind of gave me like the feeling, because it's true. And
Yeah.
I think there's so many opportunities now, especially we've identified that you can work from home where you're making a difference. And the fact that, yeah, you've built your business in a way where, yeah, you see opportunities for growth and you see massive needs. And yeah, you can offer that to different people. I think that's super awesome. And just, again, the little that we've known each other, part of the things that I would say your legacy definitely is the, oh, thank goodness feeling. Because not everyone has a watchful eye. A lot of people do drop the buck and they're kind of like, oh, but I've never heard you say it's their fault. I've never once heard you say, well, you should have. It's okay, so how can we? And I think that really stands out because, again, I'm very fortunate to connect with different people, and I hear that a lot, and I've never heard that from you. And if that's social media branding, if that's emailing, if that's anything, it's just like, no, okay, you're really like solution focused, not fault focused. So I think that's a really big part of your legacy, which you should be really proud of.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. So, so kind of as we come to a close, can you kind of, again, just highlight just ProRate PLUS Trucking Admin, sorry. Again, how can people get in contact with you, and just kind of give us a quick highlight again of everything that you do as a business?
Okay, so I assist with getting set up with ProRate and IFTA and creating systems where they're tracking the necessary data. And I can be reached by email or phone. So email at prorateplus@outlook.com. And phone is 778-888-1415. I have a Facebook page too, so if somebody spots me on there, fire a message, no problem. I will, as entrepreneurs, we always have our phones around. So
yes.
Usually you can expect a response during business hours pretty quickly.
Awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. And I really support what you're doing. And again, I like seeing people that are social and are on social, but we have a couple of mutual friends and they speak super highly of you too. So you definitely have my recommendation as well, which is really nice. So just, yeah, as we come to a close, are there any final thoughts that you would like to share today?
No, I don't think I've got anything else. We definitely went over a lot.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and I really value your time. Being a Sunday morning we both have families that we talked about. I think it's just super empowering that you showed up. You brought a lot of value today, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, you have my full support. So I'll make sure that I include all your contact details in the show notes as well. And just a shout out to all the listeners. Definitely check out Natasha. Check her out on Facebook. So ProRate PLUS Trucking Admin. I'll make sure to include all of that information in the show notes, as well as just in the constant messaging that we get to do. But yeah, Natasha, thank you so much for coming on today. This was awesome.
And thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, well, have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, that's all for today's episode. First off, thank you so much, Natasha, for hopping onto the podcast today. This was a really good interview. And to all of our dedicated listeners, I know you received tons of value today. So Natasha Braun, owner of ProRate PLUS Trucking Admin, did a really good job just highlighting how important it is to make sure that your IFTA and ProRate is set up properly, things to look out for when you're operating, but most of all, just the time it takes and the commitment it takes to make sure that you're operating compliantly. So again, thank you so much, Natasha. I really appreciate your time. Anyone that's listening that's interested to learn more about Natasha, her company, and the services that they offer, I've included all of the contact details in the show notes below. So I highly recommend that you get connected. So anyone that's listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome to this journey. Honestly, this has been a really fun experience as we've just passed over the 30 episode mark. And yeah, I just really appreciate your support. And to all of our dedicated listeners, thank you. Without you, honestly, I'm sure I'd still be doing this. I just wouldn't be as excited. And honestly, as I continue to say, just the greater the following, the greater the impact. So if you've yet to do so, I do ask that you subscribe to either to our YouTube channel or to any podcast platform that you happening to be listening on, as well as our Truck Focus newsletter that recently launched. So you can definitely sign up for that. I've also included a note or a link in the show notes below. So again, thank you for all of the support. And Natasha, thank you again. Hope everyone has a wonderful day, and let's create a pivotal impact. Bye.